I'll tell you what movie I would not have a hard time programming if I was still a theater manager, and that's The Many Saints of Newark. Look at that transition.
Sure. There you go.
That is an easy film to sort of be like, all right, we can cut our losses with this one. I mean, it's available on HBO Max already for an HBO show. I get it. Like the hardcore fans of The Sopranos are probably like, well, I got to see The Many Saints of Newark on the big screen, eh? And maybe they did. Maybe they did in the first weekend, but the second weekend, no. Everybody else is going like, I'm just gonna watch that on HBO Max because they probably already have it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it was weird to see the HBO logo on the big screen. It wasn't like the traditional HBO logo, but it was an HBO logo, and it was weird to see that in a theater.
We're talking about The Sopranos for the first time on Cinemaholics. I mean, it is a cinema show, but it's a movie. It's a prequel to The Sopranos, which was a very influential and important television program. It premiered in 1999. It went for 7 seasons. It had an infamous finale. I feel like the first time I really heard about that show from a lot of people was like the finale. Like I had heard of The Sopranos, obviously, because that show was coming out when we were, I was in high school. When it first came out, I was a kid. I was like 8, 9 years old. It ended when I was in high school. I was basically Meadow, or I guess not, because I was the
you were
younger
AJ,
brother.
I think. You were AJ.
Anthony.
AJ.
But AJ? Well, they call him Anthony.
What do you call Carmelo? What are you calling him? Everyone calls him AJ.
AJ? I haven't heard AJ. We'll get to it. I've been hearing Anthony as the young boy in the first season. Anyway, Many Saints of Newark, though, it doesn't take place in 1999, because that's the thing we should make clear in case you don't know. Sopranos takes place in the modern day. It's like modern day Goodfellas, right? It's like the mob, but in New Jersey circa 1999 when the show was coming out.
It's like an 86-hour Soprano or Scorsese film. In some respects. It's like how like Band of Brothers was an episodic form, a version of Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, the World War II thing. They kind of did the same thing with like Casino and Goodfellas and Godfather. And I never got into The Sopranos because like Will and I have talked about this off the air, but like it just came out at the wrong time. Like I didn't have HBO. Come on. I was 10. Right.
I wasn't watching HBO regularly until like Game of Thrones was a thing, because that's when I was like post-college. That's when I could afford to have streaming services like that.
Yeah, but I think one thing that's been fascinating is that like Sopranos, unlike other prestige shows, like Game of Thrones, like you mentioned, has had a pretty long shelf life. Like people our age are revisiting the show or finding the show for the first time and getting a lot out of it as far as its commentary and seeing how it is actually what it's saying about the decline of America, like the dwindling of how we see society and all that is still prevalent. And if anything, more relevant now because of how things have turned out for America. And I think that's one of the key reasons why Warner Brothers is so keen to keep this going, either as a film or a show or what have you. But as you were mentioning,
it's been 13 or 14 years.
Yeah, but The Sopranos, the finale of it, along with it being a controversial ending, it has this kind of weird point in TV history where, like you said, it is one of the key shows that legitimize television as an art form or as something that was more than just like occasionally you just flip on a TV, like making television a weekly appointment.
Prestige television.
Yes,
it
prestige
kicked
television.
off what people are still saying is the ongoing golden age of television. A lot of people would estimate.
But the weird thing about the finale is that it kind of so it's 2007, and that's around the same time that Lost is becoming a mainstay for a lot of people on television, becoming an appointment show.
I think, huh?
Yeah. And Lost kind of trained audiences to have like answers, like if you search for certain things on the show, you'll be rewarded if you like for your attention, your diligence and all this, which made it ironic that the ending of that show was also fairly divisive.
Well, that was the thing. That show was all about like fan theories, but then the ending of the show was like, but we made it up as we went along. Isn't that fun?
Right. But Sopranos, David Chase's vision for the show is often, as you'll know, or you'll see as you keep watching, hopefully, is that like he could care less about giving answers to a lot of things. Like he just wants to say certain things and avoid the easy explanations and have, like kind of a text that's rich in theories and thoughts and being like the characters kind of psychoanalyzing what's going on with the characters, what certain things could mean, what the connotations for certain things could mean.
He's big on ambiguity. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah,
which I think was what made the appeal of the show, or what made the show so appealing, and what made the idea of a movie sort of both tantalizing and also kind of scary, because what we're talking about with the film is the not so much the rise of Tony Soprano, as the marketing has been saying, but the rise or the influence of Dickie Moltisanti, Christopher Moltisanti's father, and Tony Soprano's main mentor, who is this figure.
Before we proceed, we got to get two things out of the way here, because I don't think we got to this yet. Will Ashton, you and I, we didn't watch The Sopranos growing up. We didn't watch the show.
Yeah, I watched it late.
Exactly. So you just watched all of it. Like you've been like not rewatching. You've been watching it for the first time. You finished it. You had apparently you had a great time. Like that's the impression that I got.
It's a great show. It's honest. I've not watched a lot of TV, and I'm not saying anything that I think is out of school, but it is honestly one of the best shows I've ever seen.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm so happy to hear that. And like, I am a total newbie. I watched Many Saints of Newark, this prequel, without ever watching a single episode of Sopranos. So you're getting a review about this movie from somebody who's never seen an episode of the show, from somebody who just watched the entire thing. I'm sorry, we don't have anybody here who is like, oh, I watched it back when it was coming out, because I don't know, we can't get our dads on the phone. Sorry, but
someone that's watched like the first 2 seasons or something like that. And it's just like, oh yeah, I remember Tony.
I know a few people who did watch the show, but they like around our age, like they were pirating it, like they were watching it on torrent and stuff like that. And,
I remember hearing about because like this is like back in the Blockbuster era, like how they would have like the DVDs and individual like you could rent the season, but you had to like rent like 4 discs for it, and sometimes like the second disc would be gone, but like the 4th disc would be there. So they would like watch the show out of order and like see like
just chaos.
The last 4 episodes of the season 2 or something like that, and then have to go back and watch like episodes like 3 through 6 or something, because that DVD finally became available later, which I find to be fascinating. But that's just, I feel like that's kind of like a time capsule.
You just had to head over to the local Barnes and Noble, head over to the DVD section and get Sopranos Season 7 on DVD. And then you just get the whole thing, and then you pay it right there, and you use your Visa or MasterCard. They accept both. That's my old-timey voice.
Sure. What happened to Grandma Charades? Does she have an opinion on Sopranos?
Grandma Charades? She didn't watch The Sopranos?
No.
That's not a Christian show?
Sure.
I'm shocked at you, Will Ashton.
But you had some more to say about Sopranos before I could talk about it?
Well, I think I covered. I mean, I like I said before, I watched The Many Saints of Newark, which is a prequel. It takes place in the 1960s and early 1970s. Now, I didn't know what was going on. Like, I have cultural osmosis. Like, I know who Tony Soprano is. I actually told you I watched the finale back in the day because I was curious, and I was like 17.
Yeah, everyone saw the last scene. I don't know if everyone fully understood it.
Well, I read the theories and I was like, oh, okay, I bet that's what happened. Like, I don't know. I kind of have that in my head. And as you know, I've been watching the first season because like that is one thing that this prequel movie does. I'm going to say it right off the bat. I don't think it's like an amazing movie at all. I actually think it's kind of underwhelming in a lot of respects as like something that I didn't know what was going on, but it did get me curious. I was like, this works as a like, hey, I've never seen The Sopranos before. You watch this and you're like, oh, okay, so this is setting up a bunch of stuff. I should probably watch the show because the show's supposed to be amazing, way better than this, and it'll answer a lot of questions I have. So good marketing, I guess, if you didn't already have an HBO Max account.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I find kind of fascinating about folks who are watching this cold is that like if someone were to not have watched The Sopranos and see this film, I mean, you could. I mean, it doesn't, like you can watch this without seeing The Sopranos. But for one, without giving away, there's a big spoiler for the show in the first 2 scenes of the film over the narration. So
and you don't even know for sure that it's a big spoiler, but you're sort of like, that feels like a spoiler. Like that feels like something that wouldn't happen until like late in the show.
Yeah.
And it would be a big deal. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'll tell you, Will, like, I'm not upset about it because I'm just like, it's kind of fascinating to watch the show from that perspective now of like, I know what's going to happen. And so like, there is something kind of cool about that because it's unique. Like I get to watch it from a different perspective from people who watched it when it was coming out, or you, because you weren't spoiled on it. And it's just this sort of like foreboding almost, you know what I mean?
Sure. But I mean, at the same time, I wonder what it's like watching this film without seeing the show, like, yeah, watching the film without seeing the show, because like, I don't know how you feel about these characters. Like what's your response to like Johnny Boy? What's your response to Junior? What's your response to like Livia? Like, I don't know like how you would respond to these characters, like not having the baggage of knowing who they become or who they are in the show. And just like, the movie doesn't really feed you a lot of information about them if you were to be a fresh viewer. That's why I'm kind of curious to hear your opinion about this film and how you like take these characters at this point.
My opinion is it's not a movie. It's like a weird companion piece. Like this isn't a movie. Like you can't watch this by itself and then like expect to, there's way too much intertextuality. Like you can't, like there are moments in this movie where you're just like, oh man, that's Uncle Junior for you. You know what I mean? Like, and I think like I've kind of looked into it because I've been so curious about like what went into this movie and like how it came about and like why it is the way it is. And a lot of it, from what I can tell, is that it was cut down severely. I think
which makes sense.
You know, they probably, I think David Chase, I think he probably wanted to do something with this that was a little bit more, you know, expansive. And apparently he always wanted this to be a movie, but he pitched it originally as a series, knowing they would deny it. Like it was going to be like a limited series. Like, yeah, we'll make a few episodes. It'll be like a precursor to Sopranos. And apparently HBO was like, nah. But then HBO was like, well, what if you just did like a movie version of it? And that's what he did. But that's the thing is like when you make a movie, you have to cut way too much stuff out. And that's what this movie feels like.
Was that HBO or was that Warner Brothers?
I don't know for sure. I was reading about it in one of the trades, and I think it was HBO. It could be Warner Brothers though. I don't know for sure.
Okay, because I had heard that somebody from like a Warner Brothers executive, like kept trying to get him to do something, and he was like, "Well, I really want to tell the story of the Newark race riots. Like that's something from my past that I found really interesting. It's something I want to explore because, I mean, the show itself, I mean, it's about a bunch of things, but." The show was a big part of it was David Chase working through his relationship with his own mother. Tony Soprano's relationship with his mother, Livia, is like a huge part of the show, especially the psychoanalyst, the therapist aspect. And then,
I'm definitely getting that vibe so far. I should tell listeners I'm 6 episodes in.
Yeah. And his follow-up film, Not Fade Away, is another kind of nostalgic film in this vein, which I revisited prior to seeing this because I was kind of curious how they'd be of a companion with one another. And that's like a kind of semi-autobiographical film that explores, from what I can tell, David Chase's relationship with his father. And so I think he kind of, he said what he had to say about his mother. He had to say what he had to say about his father. And now we get Many Saints of Newark. And I kind of feel like David Chase was... Well, no, well, you could argue that with Junior, but I was saying,
well, Dickie Moltisanti, right? The uncle, like that's the real uncle of Tony Soprano.
That's where I think my biggest issue with the film comes is that, like, I think David Chase had something to say with this film. I think he has a lot to say, but I don't think he has a cohesive idea of what he wanted to say, like what he wanted the main takeaway of the film to be.
I would agree with that.
If this is about Dickie Moltisanti, I don't feel like I know any more about Dickie Moltisanti than what I've heard from the legends and the stories that we get in The Sopranos.
Well, I think I don't agree because, well, sorry, I said I agreed, but in the sense of like, I thought you were going to finish that sentence with like, you don't know more about him from the beginning to the end. Like that is like the essence of this movie is like, you start with this character in the very beginning. By the end, I'm just like, I don't know anything about this guy.
Well, that's like, because that's. Well, I mean, Dickie Moltisanti is not shown in the series of Sopranos, but he's mentioned a lot, especially as far as like Christopher's upbringing, and Tony as the character he often references with like a pang of nostalgia, with like some like guilt, his relationship with Dickie Moltisanti and how they were very close. I would evoke it kind of similar to like the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of talks about Anakin, like kind of like he was an old friend, you know, like kind of like that thing.
Or how like my son and is like very close to you, Will Ashton. You're like his uncle.
Sure.
You know, you taught him how to get into those illegal gambling rings.
But like I think the big allure of the film, I mean, the marketing makes it out to be like, see the rise of Tony Soprano, and like I knew from like the get go, it's like, no, this is the story of Dickie Moltisanti. Like,
well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. I watched the movie and I was just like, okay, this is about Tony Soprano. His son plays him. You know, the son of James Gandolfini, Michael Gandolfini, plays a teenage Tony Soprano. He doesn't show up till like way past halfway
through, yeah.
And like the movie ends up being about Dickie Moltisanti. And so you got to imagine, like, if you don't know anything about this like universe, I'm just like, what am I watching? Who is this guy?
But I think that's fine. Like I'm okay with that. I think if anything, David Chase doesn't really want to talk about Tony Soprano because he said everything he has to say about Tony Soprano in the show, I'd have to assume.
Fair enough. But isn't the whole point of the movie of like who made Tony Soprano?
Right.
And so digging into Dickie.
But still, yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that like I feel like the movie gets so crowded with, you know, talking about the race riots, exploring Leslie Odom's character, bringing in the other Soprano characters outside of Tony and Livia, including like Silvio and Polly and Big Pussy and all these other characters.
I mean, that makes sense. Like, I think you gotta have to include those guys.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
To an extent.
It's like, yeah. But it's like 3 films competing at once then.
Agreed.
And it's like, because of that, I feel like the Dickie Moltisanti stuff often gets overshadowed to the point where I think like the last scene of this movie is really cool. And I think that if it had earned that moment a little bit more, I think it would have been a really big, impactful moment for both the movie and the show.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I still don't really walk away from this movie having a full concrete idea of who, Dickie Moltisanti was outside of like kind of like the generalities of just like, yeah, he was, you know, a stubborn.
He was a mean son of a bitch. Like, what are you going to say about him? I mean, he was another gangster kind of guy. Like, that's my thing with this movie is just like, what's different about it? Like, you haven't seen Goodfellas. I know you know a lot about Goodfellas from like just the culture, but like, what do I get from this movie that I haven't seen a million times? Especially like watching Sopranos. I like Sopranos so far because it's kind of like a modern version of those movies, and it feels like a reaction to Godfather and Goodfellas and Casino, and like, you know, to a lesser extent some of the other Martin Scorsese films. They reference a lot of Martin Scorsese, right?
It's an evolution of that story.
Exactly. It's metatextual. It's sort of like we understand that stuff exists, and this is what the mafia is like in reaction to it. Because like what a lot of people don't understand about mafia movies is that especially The Godfather sort of really just established this mythology around the Italian mafia that did not really exist. It's so weird because it's one of those cases.
Yeah. And Italian Americans as well, I'd say.
To an extent. I mean, I was going to be even more specific than that and say that like before The Godfather, there wasn't really this sense of like the Italian families and the mafia having this like code of like this legendary status of like, you don't rat or any of this stuff.
Right.
That stuff really came about through that movie, especially through like Goodfellas and stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you get like Capone and like the Public Enemy and like, you know, like kind of like these like legendary gangsters who are like, you know, like rob banks and like have like these kind of like romanticized stories, but like they're filled with, you know, obviously criminality and like deplicable behavior and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, The Godfather brought that to kind of more like expanded, you know, like kind of like grandiose terms, like kind of brought like a fuller life. Yeah, glamorized it, but also like brought more humanity to it. Like it explored like the like lives and struggle, and it had like a genuinely epic, grand feel to it. And then
an opera.
Yeah, but then like with Mean Streets and Goodfellas and Scorsese's, you know, a lot of Scorsese's filmography, we get, you know, like kind of the modernized version of that where like we get the criminal behavior, but it's done in more kind of like blunt fashion, but also like still keeping that epic feel, but having like kind of a more sort of like awareness of like how like applicable these characters are, how much they're like, you know, ruining society, like an ill to themselves and all this stuff. And like you said, The Sopranos is like exploring that even more to the point where it's just like America as a whole is like just kind of gotten rotten at this point where even like gangsters can't really like are kind of like caught up in it and just like, kind of taken aback by it and just being like, like even we're kind of struggling to make sense of what the world is at this point. And yeah, I mean, the weird thing about Many Saints of Newark is that like, obviously the Sopranos, the show, one of the big things about it as far as influence, that it brought a cinematic feel to television. Not that other shows weren't cinematic, but I think this is like one of the main reasons why so many shows like Mad Men and Breaking Bad could be take so many risks and be so cinematic in their presentations, because Sopranos allowed itself to do that. Ironically, when it finally gets a chance to be in cinemas, it has kind of a more television type feel. So it kind of feels like it's counterintuitive to itself almost. And that's, I think, kind of one of the bigger issues with this film.
I mean, my show, as a lot of people know, is Mad Men. I mean, I love that show. Like, that was the show that I came into at the right time. And I would hate a prequel for Mad Men. I really would. And I don't think it would lend itself as easily to Mad Men, especially because if you watch that show, I mean, it already has so many flashbacks. It's not like Sopranos, where I think it really would fit that anyway. But I mean, that's the thing, is like Mad Men as it is complete. It's a story. It has a beginning, middle, end. It just end it. Like, there's nothing else that needs to be said. Matthew Weiner said it all. And I'm so weirded out by this movie, because it just sort of is like, to me, when especially now that I'm watching The Sopranos, and I'm like, oh wow, like this is a show that really understands Goodfellas. It really understands the effect that those movies had on American society at large. And also, like, in addition to that, specifically like Italian Americans who are in the shadow of the mob, or in the mob itself, or completely removed from the mob, and what that sort of like mythology lends to like people just living their everyday lives wherever they are. And so it's weird to me that this movie goes back in time and it picks Dickie Moltisanti as this like stock character who looks like Christian Bale to me, like the entire time. I'm just like, this guy looks like Christian Bale. And he has like all of these scenes with like Ray Liotta has this like weird soap opera twin thing going on. I think his like initial character, I think, is so broad and so boring. It's like, I've seen this a million times. Okay, here's the Italian mobster. He has a Gumar. Like, he cheats on his wife. Like, and he's a gangster. Like, oh my God, I'm sick of this. Like, I'm so sick of it. But then the one thing about this movie that I was just like, oh, give me more of this, is like the Ray Liotta character that comes in, he's in prison. He's been in prison for years, and he just calls it like he sees it. Like, that to me, that had pangs of like The Irishman to me, of like, okay, here we go. This is like new, fresh, different. Like, this feels like a reason to be here. And then it ends as quickly as it begins.
Yeah, I mean, I think those scenes are some of the best in the film. To kind of go off of that point, yeah. But I think, like we said before, I think one of the reasons why Sopranos, like we said, there's a bunch of reasons why the show became great and why it was so well acclaimed. But I think one of the big reasons that it had the freedom to feel very lived in and feel novelistic in a way where characters could often just be sitting around and talking about either, big, grandiose, therapeutic type stuff, or just kind of bullshitting about any random thing that's going on day to day, pop culture, what have you. And I think the movie is so caught up trying to do so many things at once that can't really achieve that. And like I said, I think the moments that stand out to me are when it actually has a little bit more breathing room to actually have like kind of those conversational tone moments that stand out so much in the show. And I think those moments are unfortunately few and far between. Likewise, I feel like one of the big things I love about Sopranos is that has often a sort of dreamlike and cerebral quality to it that I think, largely speaking, is not in this film at all. Like, there's one thing involving like, yeah, well, not even that so much, but like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but like, there's like a thing that's introduced like with like Dickie Moltisanti coaching like blind kid baseball players that I don't quite understand the point of, but it has like this kind of like,
well, he's
almost
like
like
a
weird
saint, right?
Right, but
like the movie is all about like he was a saint, and you know what I mean? It was like, well, okay.
Well, see, I took that as kind of like has like this like it's so kind of random and so off kilter and not really addressed by any other characters.
Sequence. I didn't think it was real.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Like that scene, like how it's shot has like kind of dreamlike quality or like a romanticized quality to it that I found to be closer to like kind of like the more cerebral stuff in the show. And I was wondering if a bolder movie of this, maybe one that David Chase actually got a chance to direct, would be more willing to put stuff like that in the film. And I found that like the lack of that stuff, and also like the end scene also kind of pushes a little bit towards the cerebral as well, I guess, but very slightly. But yeah, I mean, that's also something I found to be kind of missing with this film. But I'll let you keep talking. But I do actually want to kind of talk about the things I like about the film at one point, if we can.
Of course. I mean, like it's hard because I mean, the nice thing I'll say about this is like you watch it and it's like it's serviceable. Like it's like I watched this. It's not like I watched this movie and I'm just like, this sucks. Like, no, I mean, it's fine. It's just, there's nothing about it that sticks out to me. I think like all the Leslie Odom Jr. stuff, there's this whole thing with his character that by my estimation goes nowhere. And this is one of those movies where like you meet all these characters and you're like, I feel like this would mean something to me if I had watched the show. But as it stands, like, okay, I don't know why John Magaro was playing this character with a hairpiece. Like, I don't get it. Like, Billy Magnussen is this like Silvio character, and like I understand now that I've watched.
You're getting mixed up. Billy Magnussen is Polly Walnuts.
Polly. Sorry. John Magaro is Silvio.
Silvio, yeah.
Sorry, but I'm still watching the show for the first time. But I'm just kind of watching. Like, the only character that I thought like kind of just worked for me and like kind of made sense to me was Vera Farmiga as Livia, the mother. Yeah. And I was just sort of like, oh, okay, I understand this character. I get where she's coming from. Like that stuff all worked. But a lot of the other characters, like Jon Bernthal plays his dad, Tony Soprano's dad. And I was just like, what's this guy's deal? Like, I don't know. I didn't understand it. Corey Stoll plays Uncle Junior. And like, there's all this stuff happens with Uncle Junior. And I was so thrown off because like, if you haven't watched the show, you're just like, well, why? Like, what's his problem? I don't get it. But now I'm watching the show and I'm just like, oh, okay, this guy's just like, he sucks. Like, I don't like if it makes any sense. Like, this movie just has all this extra stuff with this, like, this mistress that's also his stepmom. And I'm just like, what's the point? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of thrown off. But like, I'm watching it. It's not bad. Like, the performances aren't bad. This is directed by Alan Taylor. I mean, Alan Taylor, TV wise, is a legendary director. I mean, he's directed episodes for TV shows across the board. I mean, this guy's directed for The West Wing. He's directed for Lost. He, of course, directed for The Sopranos, 6 Feet Under, Sex and the City. He directed one of my favorite Mad Men episodes. He directed one of the best Game of Thrones episodes. He's done so much good stuff over his career. A lot of people look at him like filmography wise and they're just like, oh yeah, that guy who directed Thor: The Dark World, pass. Like, because Thor: The Dark World is considered by many to be a pretty bad movie. He also directed Terminator Genesis, right? He directed that, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So not a great run for Alan Taylor, and I don't understand it, Will Ashton. Like, he's directed amazing television. His 3 movies, I'm just like, okay.
I think he also directed like an indie called Polkaville or something that's supposed to be pretty good. Like France McDormand's.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But in any case,
also San Francisco alum. So
yeah,
I give him that.
But yeah, I mean, to his credit, he is pretty integral to the show. I don't think he's directed like the most episodes of Sopranos or anything, but he has directed a lot of episodes, especially towards the second half of the show. For instance, he directed the second to last episode, the penultimate episode of Sopranos. But yeah, I mean, I think I have to assume it's kind of because of his blockbuster influence that he got picked for this project. But yeah, I mean, I think he gives it the like kind of nostalgic lean that I think the kind of like romanticized big budget feel that I think they're going for, at least as from like a Warner Brothers standpoint. But I do, like I said, wonder what the David Chase directed version of this film would be. The one that would be, I have to assume, more willing to take risk as opposed to offering kind of just blank fan service. Like kind of like just nods and winks to the shows that feels really like beneath Sopranos. Like that's the stuff about the film that I find most puzzling. I don't know if that was Warner Brothers or Alan Taylor's influence. Like I have to assume David Chase wasn't like jazzed about doing a bunch of like nods and winks to the show or his past work. That seems like just characteristically not something he's a fan of. But I don't know. I don't know that for certain, but yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely moments of film where, as far as like the blockbusteriness of it, I appreciate. For instance, there's a big shootout scene that I think is really cool midway through the film that I think Alan Taylor does a really nice job as directing and shooting. But at the same time, like you said, I think from a pacing standpoint, just juggling these stories, he just doesn't quite capture enough of the thematics I think would have made the story as resonant as it is. Like you said, the Leslie Odom stuff, I think Leslie Odom gives a great performance, but I don't think his character is given enough time to really be fleshed out, especially in the later half of the film.
Yeah,
when
he's missing some scenes or something. Like there's something about his character that I think is just like not getting communicated that I think it would be really important.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, because I don't think it's going to happen, but this is supposed to be a first part of a film trilogy for like
Well,
Sopranos.
they talked about it, being a spin-off that they would eventually do based on this, and I don't know.
I mean, I'd certainly be interested to see it. Like I said, I think Leslie Odom's really good in this. But as far as like the Sopranos stuff that you were mentioning, I think Vera Farmiga is really good. I mean, sometimes it's a bit much, especially with the prosthetics, but I really appreciate that she has kind of like an Oedipus complex going on where she looks like both like Livia and Carmela. And like there's like kind of like an interesting thing going on there, but I don't think there's.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking of that. I thought you just meant something else, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
by the way, I didn't even realize she was supposed to be Tony Soprano's mom until like way late into the movie, because they don't explain. Really? Like that is one thing I'll give this movie credit. It doesn't hold your hand. Like there's something kind of realistic about how like they don't do a lot of those annoying things where you're like at a party and it's just like, this is Silvio. Right. And it's like really like making a show of it. It's like you kind of have to work for it, which I'll give the movie a little bit of credit. Like they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, but at the same time, the timeline of The Sopranos gets really funky with this movie because, like, for instance, Silvio in the show, it's implied that he's like maybe like 5 years Tony Sr.
I was confused about that a little bit. Yeah, I was like, wait.
And now he's like, what, like, I don't know, like 15 years older, I guess, or something.
I was thinking about this and like maybe 10. That's what I was. That's where I landed. But there is also something, on that note, there's something kind of generationally interesting about this movie because it's like, oh, this is like a prequel to a show, and it's hard for me to sort of wrap my head around. Well, this is a show that came out like 1999. So like it makes sense for the main character to be like a kid in the 60s. When I think of like kids in the 60s, I don't think of like shows where the main character, you know what I'm saying? It's just like the timeline of it now is like kind of weird the way it all like lands for modern audiences.
Right. I mean, it's also kind of weird because like Tony and Carmela, they look older than they are. Like they're actually both in like their 30s, I think, when the show starts. So
I wouldn't say that. I thought I'm watching Sopranos and I'm like, these people are in their early 40s. Easy.
No. I mean, like James Gandolfini was in his 30s when he filmed the show, and canonically, like in the show, like he's supposed to be like, I think like 38 or so.
Well, I mean, I would imagine he would have had Meadow.
He's 47 when the show ends.
Huh.
The character, at least. And it's supposed to take place over like a decade. I wouldn't have said
38. Well, okay. I would have said 40, 41. But that's interesting. I mean, there is something kind of interesting with Mad Men in that respect, because Don Draper is supposed to be like 35 in the first season of Mad Men, and you're just like, this man's 42.
Well, I mean, like, you ever like look at like pictures of like your like grandparents or something, and it's like they look like they're like 45 when they're like 32 or whatever, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, something must have been something in the air or something. They look older. I don't know.
We don't. Will Ashton, that's all to say for our HBO special. You and I are not going to look our age.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as like the like quote unquote like the impressions of the film, I think Vera Farmiga is doing a lot of interesting stuff, but Livia isn't really given a lot to do, which I find very bizarre.
She's kind of like a side character. Yeah.
But like, Tony's not really given as much of the showcase here. I think Michael Gandolfini is like the big question here as far as like, is he, because he has the most to prove here, I guess, as far as like living up to his dad's impression or performance, but also like
just a great job.
I think he's
impressed.
Good. Yeah. I think I don't think he's quite as charismatic as James Gandolfini, but he's also obviously younger.
Well, he's playing a teenager, you know what I mean? He's not as sure of himself, which kind of makes sense for it. Yeah.
But also, I really appreciate how much he brings that like kind of boyishness to screen. Like Tony Soprano as a character is often like an outgrown teenager throughout the series, and I think like kind of actually seeing Tony as a boy, I like that we see, like that kind of youthful energy and like kind of like that rambunctiousness, that desire to prove himself, but also at the same time we see a different like more sensitive side to Tony Soprano, where we see like kind of his like gentle yearning and all this stuff. But I think it feels a piece with the show, but also I think kind of undermines like what other actors are doing. Like you said, John Magaro, I think, is a fine actor. He did great work in First Cow last year. I genuinely don't know what he's trying to do as Silvio in this movie.
It was clownish. What the heck was it? Was so broad. Like I said, it was just like, I didn't understand the movie that I was watching.
Yeah.
I was like, does this make more sense if you watch the show?
I don't know. I mean, it's weird because it's like David Chase forgot that like Polly's supposed to be the funny one. He's like, the funny one, Silvio. It's like, no, Polly's the funny one. It's like Silvio. And so I think he like forgot that like Silvio's not supposed to be the comedic relief of the crew or something, or maybe because like he's younger, maybe he's like more foolish or something. I don't quite get it. But I mean, I think Corey Stoll, of the like actors playing characters in the show, I think he gives the best performance. I think his junior is generally really, really impressive. Yes,
Corey
absolutely.
Stoll?
Corey Stoll, I think the more you watch the show, the more you'll be impressed.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
With Junior's performance.
I'll keep watching because I thought that was one of the weakest things. I didn't understand that performance.
Oh, no, I thought that was... No, I thought he was really, really good.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that scene towards the end with him paints the show in a new light in a way that I find really fascinating.
Huh. I mean, honestly, like if I was going to give this show any like award, like any sort of like, man, this character really went above and beyond, I would give it to Michael Gandolfini because again, I haven't seen the show, but like knowing what I know, like James Gandolfini died in 2013. Yes. I mean, it's sad, like he died of a heart attack. His own son discovered him. Yes. And there is something so wicked about his son, just like coming into this role, doing his thing. I think he kills it, and it's just like, I can't imagine what that must have been like for him. And I'm just like so impressed. He's such a young dude.
Yeah, he grew up with the show. Like I think he was born around the time the show started. Like he was on set a lot and all that. Yeah, so. Yeah.
I mean, the guy right now, I think he's only like 21, 22, and he's
something
playing like a teenager. Yeah, I don't know. I give him a lot of credit, a lot of props. That's got to be tough to do, and I think he does his dad proud.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like I was trying to say before, I think he's the one that has the most to prove with this performance.
For sure.
Like, at the end of the day, like John Magaro, like no matter how we feel about Silvio, like he'll still probably get work from this. It's not like it's going to like kill his career or anything. Michael Gandolfini is he's got the biggest shoes to fill. He has the most to prove. He's obviously like the center of the marketing, all that stuff. And I think he does like, I mean, it's you're never going to live up to James Gandolfini's performance, but I think like you said, he moves beyond impression and makes it a fully well-rounded character in a way that I think even surpasses what's on the page, and in a way that I find really impressive and really heartfelt.
Mm-hmm. He's going to be in a couple more movies. He's in the next Russo brothers movie, the action movie, The Gray Man.
Okay. Yeah, he was in Cherry for a little bit, I remember.
Yeah, he had a small role in Cherry. He was at that Cousin Joe or something, and then he's in one other movie.
I don't know if you caught. There's actually, I think, a kind of a nod in Cherry to The Sopranos, where he's playing. I
definitely didn't catch that.
He's playing like Nintendo with one hand, which seems to be.
I just saw that scene.
Yeah,
his dad plays they're playing Mario Kart with one hand. That was funny.
Yeah.
He's also going to be in the next Ari Aster movie. I know that, the Disappointment movie. It's Disappointment something. I'd have to look it up. But he plays with I think Joaquin Phoenix is the lead in that.
Yes.
That's coming out. I think that's filming right now. So I think that might be coming out next year,
recently.
2023.
Yeah, I was gonna say it either recently ended filming or it's still going. I don't quite know how the production was, but
I think if it hasn't finished, it's going to finish soon because it started in the summer, and I think they might still be working on a few scenes. But yeah, I mean that movie is one of my most anticipated. I mean that's A24. Pavel Porogoski is doing the cinematography.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Nathan Lane stars in that movie. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, because that's like a 3 generation spanning film, right? Like it's like a long epic. Yeah,
it spans a few decades. And I don't think Michael Gandolfini has a huge role in it, but I think like the main thing is like Patti LuPone and Joaquin Phoenix and all them. But no, I mean he's going to be in it, and so power to him. I hope he kicks ass in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also find it really fascinating that this performance is coming so shortly before Cooper Hoffman's performance in Licorice Pizza. And, it's a kind of similar situation where Philip Seymour Hoffman's kid is like taking on this lead role, like kind of proving himself with his dad. And they also kind of weirdly, I don't know if you've seen Cooper Hoffman and like Michael Gandolfini like together, but they also weirdly look kind of similar. And I'm curious if one day they'll like play brothers or something, because I think that'd be an interesting thing to do.
I guess that's it. I mean, I think we covered it. I mean, my main thing on it, and before we get into our game, I don't recommend watching this if you've never watched the show. But if you do watch it and you've never seen a show, you might be like me and you might be like, well, I'm confused. I'll watch the show now. But at the same time, it's like you probably don't want to get spoiled, I guess. Like, I guess just watch The Sopranos. I like The Sopranos way more than this movie. So I would have probably preferred the other way around. But yeah, I mean, I imagine, Will, you probably are like it sounds to me like this is like worth checking out. If you're a fan of The Sopranos, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more endeared to the film as a mid-budget studio film for adults than as a prequel or a film of peace with The Sopranos, because I think it was always going to be a letdown as far as like being a continuation to The Sopranos. I think like there's just no way they could have lived up to that pedigree. But I think as a Warner Brothers film that's clearly made for adults, like featuring adult characters for the most part, I think that's where it's probably at its most engaging and where I'm more endeared by it. As a continuation of Sopranos, like I said, I just think it's fine. Like it's what I expected, I guess. Like it's nothing terribly interesting, and I don't think it really adds a whole lot to the mythos of Sopranos. But I do think I'll either be more or less endeared with it as I think about it more, because I do think it's interesting that Christopher narrates it, and like he is I've heard theories that like this movie is kind of like him, like if like Christopher finally got the chance to like kind of write his screenplay and make a movie about his dad, what it would be. And I think that's an interesting I don't know if that's what David Chase had in mind, but I certainly think there's probably more going on here than we're giving him credit. And I would hope as time passes that like we kind of like, like that interpretation opens up and we finally kind of get a better idea of what's going on here. Same way that people have grown to like the series finale of Sopranos more over time. But I don't know if that's the case here or not, because like we said, I think the text here is unfortunately a bit thin, and it just feels like it's an overcrowded film that is obviously very ambitious, but is trying to do so much with such a limited amount of time. And it's, kind of buried in the shadow of this obviously monumental series. And it just was kind of doomed to fail for that reason.
All right. Well, I guess this is one of those weeks where you and I basically agree on all the movies. I mean, just two, but hey.
Yeah, I mean,
that's fine.
I think I'm slightly more positive on Many Saints, but overall, I think we're pretty similar.
Yeah, same zone. Close enough. Horseshoes. All right, Will Asher, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score of Many Saints of Newark is, if you had to guess?
I'm gonna say 72%.
Man, you're always so close. 75%.
Okay,
that's impressive, though. I mean, yeah, we're within the margin of error. 154 reviews have been counted so far. That's going to keep climbing, I'm sure. The audience score, though, what do you think of that?
Oh, I think this is kind of low, because I'm hearing a lot of mixed negative things from fans so far. And I think fans are primarily the people who have watched the film. So I'm going to say, I'll go a little bit higher than what my gut's saying. I'm going to say 61%.
All right, 58%. Again, okay. You're still within the margin of error, so I'm proud of you. 58% audience score. I think, yeah, probably for the reasons you're citing, and 250 plus verified ratings. So very low comparatively. And then we'll finish off with cinema score. What do you think of that?
For this film, I'm going to say B-.
Again, pretty close. C+, so
C+,
a little bit lower. And I think we can imagine why. I think, yeah, I do think all the reasons we kind of gave. I think people are just kind of reacting to this the way they're going to react. I don't know. I don't make much of it personally. I watched it and I have plenty of complaints, but like, I don't know, like I wouldn't walk away from it being like, what a waste of time. It's egregiously bad. It's like, nah, I just, it's got its own thing kind of going on. You either click with it or you don't. There's things about it. And
I mean,
that's all there is.
Yeah. I mean, so I think some of it's pretty sophisticated and thoughtful, and I think some of it's kind of flat and underwhelming. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, I think, overall.
Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.